The fluorescent lights in Sector 7 had been flickering for 3 weeks, casting the detention corridor in a stuttering half-darkness that made everything look like a malfunctioning holovid. Eli Varon had stopped filing maintenance requests after the first dozen went unanswered. Now he just squinted at his datapad and tried not to think about the headaches. "Another beautiful day in paradise," he muttered, swiping through the endless queue of processing forms. Subject 7702 through 7756, all awaiting classification, all wearing the same gray jumpsuits, all staring at him through reinforced plexiglass with varying degrees of hope or resignation. Mostly resignation. The extraterrestrial processing center had sounded impressive in the job listing. What they hadn't mentioned was that processing mostly meant watching beings from dying worlds sit in holding cells while bureaucrats decided their fates at a pace that would make continental drift look hasty. Eli had been here 18 months. It felt like 18 years. His co-worker, Davies, rolled past on a hover chair, balancing a protein shake and 3 datapads. "You still on intake duty? Man, you must have really pissed someone off." "I exist. That seems to be enough." Eli didn't look up. Davies meant well, but conversation required energy Eli had stopped pretending to have. The wormhole above Earth had changed everything, they said. Stable interdimensional gateway, they said. Humanitarian crisis, they said. What they meant was, bureaucratic nightmare wrapped in xenophobia and tied with red tape. 3 years of refugees pouring through from collapsing realities, and humanity's grand response was to build what amounted to a cosmic DMV with cells. Eli's humor had grown darker with each passing month, his jokes landing like dead satellites. But it beat the alternative, which was feeling everything fully. Better to laugh at the absurdity than drown in the cruelty. The power failed at 1847 hours. Not unusual. The emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in crimson, and the environmental systems groaned into low-power mode. Eli felt the temperature start to drop immediately. Budget cuts meant the backup generators barely kept life support running, let alone heating. He should have logged off and headed home. His shift ended in 13 minutes. But something made him do one more walk through the holding area, datapad in hand, checking numbers against files in that mindless way that meant his brain could fully disengage. That's when he saw her. She was in the corner of cell 47, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around herself. The emergency lighting caught the angles of her face, the sharp elegance of her features, and the ears, long and swept back, almost luminous at the pointed tips. Subject 7731, his datapad informed him. Ethery. Female. Estimated age 23 standard years. Status, pending tertiary evaluation. What the datapad didn't capture was the trembling. Or the way her eyes tracked the guards as they moved past, distributing ration packs with all the warmth of automated dispensers. Except they skipped cell 47 entirely. Eli frowned. He checked the distribution log. Cell 47 was marked as fed. But the guards had definitely walked right past. "Hey," he called out to Reynolds, the shift supervisor. 47 didn't get rations. Reynolds barely glanced up. "Log says she did." "Log's wrong. I just watched you skip her. Then the log will get corrected in the morning." Reynolds's tone suggested the conversation was over. Eli felt that familiar tightness in his chest, the one that usually preceded him saying something that would get him written up. He looked back at cell 47. The woman hadn't moved, but her eyes had shifted to him. They were silver. Actually silver, like polished metal, reflecting the red emergency lights in a way that made them seem to glow. She looked away quickly when their gazes met. Eli made a decision that probably ranked somewhere between inadvisable and career-ending on the smart choices spectrum. He pulled the meal bar from his jacket pocket, his own dinner, the one that was supposed to sustain him through the maglev ride home and the 3 flights of stairs to his apartment. The barrier was reinforced plexiglass with a narrow slot at the bottom for passing items. Technically, only authorized materials were supposed to go through. Technically, Eli was supposed to care about that. He walked to cell 47. Broke the meal bar in half. Slid one piece through the slot. The woman stared at it like he'd just passed through a live grenade. Her hands remained locked around her knees. She didn't move. "It's food," Eli said, feeling stupid. Obviously it was food. But her expression suggested she'd forgotten what kindness looked like. Not great food, admittedly. Tastes like cardboard. Had a baby with disappointment. But it's protein and calories, and it's yours if you want it. Still she didn't move. Eli noticed her hands were shaking harder now. "Look, I'm going to leave it here." He set the piece down just inside the slot. No strings attached. No forms to fill out. Just food. Revolutionary concept, I know. He started to turn away, then paused. "For what it's worth, whoever skipped you was an asshole. And the logs are bullshit." The laugh that came from his own mouth was bitter. "Welcome to Earth. We're very welcoming. Can't you tell?" He made it 5 steps before he heard it, a sound so small he almost missed it under the hum of the emergency systems. A hitching breath. Then another. He turned back. She'd picked up the meal bar with both hands, holding it like something precious. And tears were running down her face, catching the red light, leaving tracks through the grime on her cheeks. She took a bite, and a sob broke from her throat, not of sadness but something more complex, more devastating. Those silver eyes lifted to meet his again. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, accented in ways that suggested her mouth wasn't quite shaped for human phonemes. "You're not like them." 3 words. They hit Eli somewhere in the chest he'd thought he'd successfully armored over with cynicism and bad jokes. He should have walked away. Logged off. Gone home. Pretended he hadn't just violated about 15 facility protocols. Instead, he found himself crouching down, level with her, the plexiglass between them suddenly feeling like the only barrier that mattered. "What's your name?" he asked. She took another bite, savoring it in a way that made Eli's stomach hurt with guilt at every meal he'd taken for granted. "Lyrie. I'm Eli." He paused. "And for what it's worth, Lyrie, you're right. I'm not like them. I'm significantly more likely to get fired." The corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close enough to count as hope. Eli's apartment smelled like recycled air and regret, which was about standard for New Geneva housing blocks. He sat cross-legged on his floor at 3 in the morning, his datapad propped against a stack of instant noodle containers, scrolling through files he absolutely shouldn't have access to. "This is fine," he told the empty room. "Committing light treason at 3 a.m. is a perfectly reasonable hobby. Very normal. The facility's security wasn't actually that sophisticated if you knew where to look." Eli had been doing data entry for 18 months, which meant he'd watched approximately 700 software updates get installed with default passwords. Administrators were lazy. Eli was betting his freedom on that laziness. Subject 7731. Lyrie. He pulled up her intake file and felt his stomach drop. Species, Ethery. Homeworld, Ether Prime, Sector 98 Delta. Status, destroyed. Cause, stellar expansion, premature red giant phase. Survivors, estimated 12,000, scattered across refuge stations. Threat assessment, Class 4. Class 4. Eli scrolled faster. Class 4 meant aggressive. Potentially dangerous. Subject to enhanced containment protocols and, he felt his blood go cold, expedited off-world processing. Which was bureaucratic speak for, shipped somewhere awful before anyone asks questions. He dug deeper into the threat assessment files, pulling up the first contact reports from 3 years ago. The Ethery had arrived through the wormhole in damaged colony ships, broadcasting distress signals in 17 languages. The initial translation AI had classified their communication style as hostile, based on. Eli squinted at the screen. Based on emotional intensity markers that exceeded normal parameters. So they felt things strongly and the computer decided that made them dangerous. He rubbed his eyes. Fantastic. Really showing our best side as a species. The truth was buried in an appendix to an appendix, a xenopsychology report filed by someone who'd clearly been overruled. The Etheri are an empathic species with heightened emotional resonance. Their communication includes psycho-emotional components that standard translation matrices interpret as aggression. Recommend reassessment of threat classification. Recommendation status, denied. Filed by Administrator J. Torres. Reason, insufficient evidence to override AI assessment protocols. Eli took a screenshot, then another, downloading everything he could find. The more he read, the angrier he got. The Etheri weren't aggressive. They were empaths. They could sense emotions, project them, share them. In a detention facility designed to strip dignity and hope, they'd be drowning in collective misery. No wonder Lyrie had looked half dead. She probably felt everyone's suffering as her own. His datapad chimed. Incoming message from Davies, dude, why is your terminal flagged for unusual access patterns? What are you doing? Eli's fingers froze over the keyboard. Right. The security AI logged everything. He typed back, insomnia. Looking at cat videos. Very therapeutic. At 3 a.m. on the classified server. Very classified cats. A pause. Then, whatever you're doing, stop. They monitor this stuff. I'm serious. Eli logged off, but not before transferring the files to an encrypted personal drive. He lay back on the floor and stared at his ceiling, where a water stain had slowly been forming the shape of either Australia or a warning about his life choices. His next shift started in 4 hours. He should sleep. Instead, he found himself thinking about Silver Eyes and the way Lyrie had held that meal bar like it was sacred. The way she'd whispered, "You're not like them," with such conviction, as if she could see something in him he'd stopped believing existed. Empaths. She'd known he was different because she'd felt it. Felt him. That thought should have been unsettling, but instead it sat in his chest like warmth, like proof that he hadn't completely calcified into the cynical bureaucrat he pretended to be. He showed up to work with 17 minutes of sleep and a plan that qualified as either brave or suicidal. His first stop was the supply room, where he pocketed 3 extra meal bars. His second was a detour through maintenance, where he swiped a plasma torch and a tablet stylus that barely worked. Cell 47 looked the same in daylight, fluorescent and depressing. Lyrie sat in the same corner, but her posture had changed slightly. Less hunched. She looked up when he approached, those silver eyes tracking his movement with sharp intelligence. "Morning," Eli said, sliding a meal bar through the slot. "Brought breakfast. Still tastes like existential despair, but it's hot existential despair, which is technically an upgrade." She took it, and something that might have been amusement flickered across her face. "You came back. Shocking, I know. Usually people meet me once and make better life choices." He glanced around, making sure no guards were in immediate earshot, then crouched down. "I need to ask you something. Can you," he paused, unsure how to phrase it. "Can you feel what people are feeling? Like, emotions?" Lyrie's expression shifted, became guarded. She'd probably learned that admitting to abilities got you reclassified, moved to worse places. But after a moment, she nodded. "Yes. Your species calls it empathy, but it's more than that. We sense the emotional frequency of consciousness itself. It's like," she struggled for the words. "Like hearing music, but the music is made of feeling. And in here." Eli gestured to the facility around them. "What do you hear?" Her face went carefully blank. "Screaming. All the time. So much fear and pain and loneliness that it drowns everything else. I've learned to make myself small, to not listen, but it never stops completely. Eli felt something crack open in his chest. That's why he didn't finish. Why she looked half-starved and exhausted. She was being slowly crushed under the weight of everyone else's suffering. But you, Lyrie continued, her voice dropping to something private, you're different. Your frequency is clear. When you're near, I can hear something besides the screaming. I can hear, she paused, seeming to search for the right word. Hope. Kindness. It's been so long I almost forgot what it sounds like. Eli pulled out the tablet stylus and drew a simple stick figure on the plexiglass. That's me, he said. Beacon of hope. Very majestic. That got a real smile from her, small but genuine. He drew another figure with long ears. That's you. Currently imprisoned by idiots who can't read their own xenopsychology reports. You read my file. I read a lot of files. Turns out your people got labeled dangerous because a computer had the emotional intelligence of a potato. He drew a potato with angry eyebrows. This is Administrator Torres. He denied the appeal to reclassify you. I don't like him. Lyrie laughed, the sound like something delicate and unexpected. You're strange. I prefer charmingly unhinged, but sure. Eli glanced over his shoulder again. His window was closing. Listen, your processing date is coming up. They're shipping you to Mars Colony 7 in 2 weeks. Do you know what that means? Her smile faded. Forced labor. Worse. The electromagnetic fields from the terraforming equipment would, he saw her already tensing, already knowing. Yeah. You'd feel everyone's pain amplified by planetary-scale machinery. It would break you. Then why are they sending us there? Because someone's making money and no one's asking questions. Eli stood, knees cracking. He slid a piece of paper through the slot with a crude map sketched on it. Maintenance Tunnel C7, 3rd sublevel. Access through the laundry processing. Guard rotation changes at 2,200 hours. Power grid tests happen every Tuesday at 2,145, causes temporary camera blackouts. Lyrie stared at the paper. You're planning something. I'm planning several things, most of them stupid. He met her eyes. But I can't let them ship you somewhere that'll kill you. Call it a character flaw. Why? The question was soft but urgent. You don't know me. You could lose everything. Eli thought about that. About 18 months of watching cruelty become routine. About the person he used to be before this place had started grinding him down into nothing. About silver eyes and the impossible relief of being seen as something other than what he'd become. Maybe I'm tired of being like them, he said finally. Maybe you whispering that I'm different made me want to actually be different. Maybe I'm just an idiot with access to maintenance schedules. He shrugged. Probably all three. He walked away before she could respond, before the cameras could log him lingering too long. But he felt her watching him go, felt the weight of what he'd just set in motion settling over his shoulders like gravity. His datapad chimed. Another message from Davies, security flagged your terminal again. Whatever you're doing, it's not cats. Be careful. Eli typed back, too late for careful. How are you with felonies? The laundry processing center occupied the bowels of the facility, 3 levels below anything most employees ever saw. Eli had convinced Davies to swap shifts with him, claiming he needed the overnight differential pay to cover rent. What he actually needed was access to the sublevel maintenance corridors during the weekly power grid test. This is the worst plan in the history of plans, he muttered, checking his chronometer. 2,137 hours. 8 minutes until the test sequence began. I've seen better planning from people who thought, hold my beer, were last words. He'd spent the last week learning Lyri's abilities through stolen conversations at her cell. The ethery empathy wasn't passive reception, it was quantum entanglement of conscious states. They could sense the emotional frequency of nearby minds, read intentions like radio signals, even influence feelings if the connection was strong enough. In her weakened state, Lyri's range was limited to maybe 20 meters, but it would have to be enough. The first part of his plan had gone surprisingly well, which made Eli deeply suspicious. He'd forged a maintenance requisition form, created a fake work order about ventilation issues in Sector 7, and nobody had questioned it. Either he was secretly a criminal mastermind or security was even more incompetent than he'd thought. Probably the second thing. At 21:45, the lights flickered. Emergency systems engaged, bathing everything in that familiar red glow. Eli moved fast, using his stolen maintenance credentials to unlock the service corridor that ran parallel to the detention cells. The cameras would be cycling offline for exactly 90 seconds during the grid test. 90 seconds to reach cell 47, override the lock with the security bypass he'd coded into his datapad, and get Lyri into the maintenance tunnels. 60 seconds to completely ruin his life. No pressure. He ran, boots echoing on metal grating, and nearly collided with Lyri the moment he opened her cell. She'd been waiting by the door, pressed against it, ready. Her silver eyes were wide but focused. "Tell me this isn't the stupid part of the plan," she said. "This is definitely the stupid part." Eli grabbed her hand, her skin was cold, fingers trembling, and pulled her into the corridor. "The stupider part comes later. I'm pacing myself." They moved through shadows and emergency lighting, Lyri stumbling occasionally, clearly weakened from malnutrition and sensory overload. Eli kept expecting alarms, guards, the universe deciding to collect on all the karma he'd been banking. Instead, they made it to the maintenance access hatch in 43 seconds. "Okay, so far so good," Eli whispered, prying open the hatch. "Which statistically means everything's about to go sideways. You're not inspiring confidence. I'm inspiring realism. It's different." He helped her through the hatch into a tunnel barely tall enough to stand in. Pipes and conduits lined the walls, humming with power and data transfer. "Follow this tunnel north, that way, until you reach junction box 12. There's a cargo lift that only runs during shift changes. You'll..." "Wait." Lyri grabbed his arm. "You're not coming. Someone needs to close the hatch, make it look like maintenance actually happened, and hopefully buy you time before anyone notices you're gone." He tried for a smile. "Plus, I have a third act in mind. Very dramatic. You'll love it. Eli. Go. Please." He squeezed her hand once. "I didn't break you out just to watch you get caught in a tunnel." She hesitated, silver eyes searching his face, and Eli felt something shift in the air between them. A warmth that wasn't physical, more like an emotion that didn't belong to him suddenly blooming in his chest. Gratitude, fierce and bright, threaded with something that felt like sorrow. "You're projecting," he said softly. "I can feel it." "That's you, isn't it?" Lyri pulled back, looking stricken. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. When emotions are strong, it's harder to contain them." "You feel..." She stopped. "You feel like morning. Like the first light after endless darkness. I wanted you to know that. To feel what you are to me." Eli's throat tightened. "Go," he managed. "Before I get even more emotionally compromised and forget how to think." She went, disappearing into the tunnel, and Eli sealed the hatch behind her. He made it back to the laundry processing center, clocked out normally, and rode the maglev home with his heart trying to escape his ribcage through sheer velocity. Phase 1 complete. Phase 2 was going to require help. Davies lived in the same housing block, 7th floor, in an apartment that somehow smelled like coffee at all hours. He opened the door at 0230 hours wearing pajamas covered in cartoon nebulas and an expression of deep resignation. You look like you've committed crimes, Davies said. Hypothetically, if someone had helped an alien refugee escape from a detention facility, would you help them expose the systematic corruption that's been starving said refugees? Davies stared at him. Blinked. You want coffee or something stronger? Both. Definitely both. They sat at Davies's kitchen counter, and Eli laid out everything, the files he'd stolen, the translation errors, the black market ration scheme, the fact that empathic species were being sent to locations that would torture them with amplified emotional feedback. Davies listened, his expression cycling through disbelief, horror, and finally something that looked like determination. You're insane, Davies said. You know that, right? You've thrown away your career, probably going to jail, and for what? One person. For 12,000 people who deserve better than being labeled dangerous because a computer couldn't understand feelings. Eli pulled up the files on his datapad. And because someone told me I'm not like the others, and I realized I really don't want to be like them. The people who see suffering and file reports about it instead of doing something. Davies was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached for his own datapad. My partner works for the Independent News Network. The one that's been investigating facility conditions. If we give them this data, with documented evidence of the ration theft and the mistranslation that classified the E3 as threats, they'll have a story big enough to force an investigation. And you'll be the whistleblower who gets either celebrated or prosecuted, depending on how much the government wants to save face. Davies met his eyes. You ready for that? Eli thought about silver eyes and the sensation of feeling like mourning to someone. About 18 months of slow suffocation in bureaucratic cruelty, and the strange lightness that had come from finally doing something that mattered. Yeah, he said. I'm ready. They spent the next 3 hours compiling evidence, cross-referencing files, building a case that even the most corrupt administrator couldn't dismiss. Dawn was breaking over New Geneva when Davies finally sent the encrypted package to his partner with a message that read, Big story. Whistleblower willing to go on record. Move fast. Eli went home to his apartment and waited. He didn't have to wait long. At 0847 hours, his datapad lit up with notifications. Facility security requesting his presence. Multiple missed calls from his supervisor. A news alert, breaking, detention facility corruption exposed, alien species wrongly classified as dangerous. Well, Eli said to his empty apartment, at least unemployment comes with entertainment value. His datapad chimed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him accept the call. Lyrie's face appeared on the screen, grainy and pixelated but unmistakable. She was somewhere with better lighting, somewhere that wasn't a cell. Behind her, he could see other E3, those distinctive ears catching the light. You did it, she said, and her voice carried wonder. The news is everywhere. They're releasing us. Reclassifying us. Investigating the administrators. She paused. They're also looking for you. Yeah, I noticed. Probably should have planned for the becoming a wanted man part. He tried to smile. How are you? Where are you? Safe house. There's a network of people, humans and others, who've been helping refugees. They found me when I reached the surface. Eli, there are good people here. Not everyone is like the ones in the facility. I know. He did know, or at least he was starting to remember. I'm glad you're safe. Come find me. Her silver eyes were intense even through the bad connection. Please. This isn't over, and I don't want, she stopped, seemed to gather courage. I don't want you to face what comes next alone. You made me remember what connection feels like. Let me return that. Eli looked around his apartment, at the water stain and the instant noodles and the life he'd been sleepwalking through. At the person he'd been versus the person he could be. Send me the address, he said. I'm coming. The safe house occupied the third floor of what had once been a textile factory, back when New Geneva still manufactured things instead of just processing refugees and despair. Eli stood outside at 1,430 hours, holding a duffel bag containing everything he owned that mattered, which turned out to be his data pad, 3 changes of clothes, and a half-empty bottle of whiskey he'd been saving for either celebration or catastrophe. Definitely catastrophe, he muttered, pressing the buzzer. Though maybe a little celebration mixed in. Catastrophation. That should be a word. The door opened, revealing a woman with cybernetic eyes that glowed faint blue in the dim hallway. She looked him up and down with an expression that suggested she'd seen everything and been disappointed by most of it. "You're the idiot from the news," she said. "Eli Varon, professional idiot, at your service." He tried for charming. "I'm here to see Lyrie." "Yeah, she told us you'd show up." The woman stepped aside. "I'm Kess. Welcome to the Underground Railroad for beings your government wishes would disappear quietly. Don't touch anything expensive, and if you're secretly working for facility security, know that I have 17 ways to kill you with household objects." Noted. "I'll be very respectful of your kitchen utensils." The interior was larger than it looked from outside, open plan with sleeping areas sectioned off by hanging fabric and foam barriers. At least 30 people, human and otherwise, occupied the space. Eli spotted 4 different species he recognized from intake files, plus a few he didn't. Everyone moved with the careful tension of people who'd learned that safety was temporary and noise could be dangerous. Lyrie emerged from behind a partition, and Eli felt that strange warmth bloom in his chest again before remembering she was probably projecting. She looked better than she had in the cell, color in her face, steadiness in her movement. But her silver eyes carried new worries. "You came," she said, and there was relief in her voice that made something in Eli's chest constrict. "You invited me to your safe house. Would have been rude to decline." He glanced around. "Nice place. Very resistance movement chic. The hanging sheets really tie the room together." She almost smiled. "Come. There's someone you should meet." She led him to a corner where an older man sat surrounded by holographic displays, fingers dancing through data streams with practiced efficiency. He had the look of someone who'd been handsome once, before exhaustion and chronic stress had worn him down to angles. "This is Marcus," Lyrie said. "He runs the network." Marcus looked up, and his eyes went sharp with recognition. "Eli Varon. You've made quite the splash. Every news outlet is running your story, and facility security has a warrant out for your arrest. Unauthorized access to classified systems, aiding in the escape of a detainee, theft of government property." He waved a hand. "The list goes on. You're either very brave or very stupid. Why not both?" "I'm multi-talented." "He's definitely both," Lyrie said, and there was something fond in her voice that made Eli's stomach do complicated things. Marcus gestured to the displays. "Your leak worked. They're conducting a full audit of the detention facilities, and the E3 are being reclassified from Class 4 to Class 2. That means proper housing, nutrition, medical care. You've probably saved thousands of lives." "Great. Do I get a medal or just the arrest warrant?" "You get to help us finish what you started." Marcus pulled up a new hologram, and Eli recognized financial records. The ration theft was just one piece. There's a whole network of corruption, fake work orders, embezzled funds, refugees being sold as labor to off-world colonies. Your files gave us a starting point, but we need more evidence to bring down the entire system. Eli felt exhaustion creeping in, the adrenaline that had carried him through the last week finally depleting. "So instead of going to jail for one crime, you want me to commit more crimes? That's your recruitment pitch? I want you to decide who you are." Marcus's expression was level. "You can turn yourself in, plead guilty, probably get a reduced sentence for cooperation. Or you can keep fighting. Keep being the person who breaks his meal in half instead of walking past suffering." Lyrie's hand found his, fingers intertwining. That warmth spread through him again, but underneath it he felt her genuine emotion, hope threaded with fear, connection laced with uncertainty. She was letting him feel what she felt, sharing the weight. No pressure, Eli said weakly. Massive pressure, Marcus corrected. But also purpose. Meaning. The chance to actually matter. Eli looked at the displays, at the people scattered throughout the safe house, at Lyrie's silver eyes watching him with an intensity that suggested his answer meant more than just strategy. He thought about his apartment and his job and the person he'd been slowly becoming, small and bitter and safe. Okay, he heard himself say. What do you need me to do? The plan Marcus laid out was insane, which seemed to be the theme of Eli's recent decision-making. They needed someone to infiltrate the facility's central database physically. Remote access was too monitored, too easy to trace. Someone who knew the layout, who had credentials that might still work for a few hours before security fully updated their systems. So me, Eli said. You need me to break into the place I just escaped from, using credentials from the job I just destroyed, to steal more evidence that will definitely send me to prison. Essentially, yes. And if I get caught? They'll probably make an example of you. Public trial, maximum sentence, lots of media coverage about respecting the law and not helping dangerous aliens. Marcus paused. But if you succeed, we can prove that facility administrators have been trafficking refugees to corporate labor colonies for profit. We can dismantle the entire system. Eli laughed, the sound a little unhinged. You know what? Fine. I've already committed to terrible life choices. Might as well lean into it. Lyrie squeezed his hand. You don't have to do this. Yeah, I do. Because you told me I'm not like them, and every time I think about becoming like them, I feel sick. He met her eyes. Plus, you're here. And I'm starting to think that maybe being wherever you are is better than being safe somewhere else. He felt the emotion spike through their connection, surprise, warmth, something complicated that might have been joy mixed with terror. Lyrie's cheeks flushed, a pale purple undertone showing beneath her skin. I'm projecting again, she said quietly. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's nice, knowing what someone actually feels instead of guessing. He smiled. Even if what you feel is apparently, this human is an idiot but maybe an endearing idiot. That's not, she stopped, reconsidering. Okay, that's partially accurate. Marcus cleared his throat. Touching moment, but we're on a timeline. Security will realize their systems are compromised within 48 hours. We need to move tomorrow night. Tomorrow night. Eli felt the weight of it settling over him. He'd been running on crisis adrenaline and spite for days, but the reality was catching up. He could die doing this. He could spend decades in prison. He could lose everything. He looked at Lyrie, at the hope in her silver eyes, at the other refugees scattered throughout the safe house who were counting on people like him to give a damn. He thought about 18 months of watching cruelty become routine, and the strange peace that had come from finally doing something about it. Tomorrow night, he agreed. But tonight, do you people have any food here that doesn't taste like cardboard? Because I'm pretty sure my last meal shouldn't be a protein bar. Kes appeared with bowls of something that smelled like synthetic curry. We have rations that taste like cardboard pretending to be curry. Best I can offer. I'll take it. Eli accepted the bowl. Any chance you have utensils, or are we going full disaster mode? There are spoons somewhere. Probably. Kes wandered off. Lyrie sat beside him, their shoulders touching, and Eli felt that connection humming between them, fear and hope and something fragile that might have been the beginning of trust. Or maybe something more. Tell me about your world, Eli said. Before it ended. I want to know what you're fighting to remember. She did, her voice soft in the industrial space, painting pictures of crystal cities and music that shaped matter and a people who'd built their entire civilization on the idea that consciousness was meant to be shared. And Eli listened, eating terrible curry, sitting in a safe house full of refugees and rebels, and realized he'd never felt more like himself. Tomorrow he'd commit more crimes. Tonight, he'd just be here. The trial lasted 6 weeks and became the most watched legal proceeding in New Geneva's history. Eli sat in the defendant's chair for 3 of those weeks, answering questions about unauthorized access, data theft, and aiding in the escape of a detainee. His lawyer, provided pro bono by the Refugee Advocacy Network, kept telling him to look remorseful. Eli kept forgetting and smiling whenever Lyrie entered the gallery. "You're supposed to be taking this seriously," Davies whispered during a recess. He'd been subpoenaed as a witness and had somehow avoided prosecution by claiming ignorance of Eli's plans. Which was partially true and mostly strategic lying. "I am taking it seriously. I'm just also aware that I'm either going to prison or becoming a folk hero, and I've decided to enjoy the absurdity." Eli watched the prosecution team huddle around their datapads, looking increasingly frustrated. "Besides, have you seen the footage they're showing? I look very dramatic running through those corridors. Very action hero. You look like a panicked accountant having a breakdown." Same thing. The turning point came when Marcus's team released the complete files to every major news network simultaneously. Financial records showing millions in embezzled funds. Transportation manifests proving refugees were being sold to corporate labor colonies for profit. Communication logs between facility administrators and off-world mining operations, negotiating prices per head like they were livestock. The public response was volcanic. Protests erupted outside every detention facility on Earth. Politicians who'd been defending the system suddenly discovered they'd always opposed it. 3 administrators were arrested, including the infamous Torres who denied the E3 reclassification. The facility's entire command structure collapsed within 72 hours. On day 19 of the trial, the prosecution dropped all charges against Eli except 1 count of unauthorized system access. The judge, looking deeply tired of the media circus, sentenced him to time served and 200 hours of community service. "Mr. Varon," the judge said, "you have created an enormous legal headache for this court. You've also exposed corruption that should have been addressed years ago. I don't know whether to commend you or hold you in contempt. Instead, I'm going to let you go and hope you find less dramatic ways to pursue justice in the future." Eli stood. "Your Honor, I can't promise anything, but I'll try to keep the felonies to a minimum." "Please do." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed like digital locusts, shouting questions about heroes and whistleblowers and whether he'd do it again. Eli pushed through them, looking for silver eyes in the crowd, and found Lyrie waiting by the transport station, wearing clothes that actually fit and smiling in a way that made his chest ache. "You're free," she said when he reached her. "Technically, I'm on probation and banned from government facilities for life, but sure, let's call it free." He pulled her into a hug, feeling that familiar warmth bloom between them, relief and joy and something deeper that had been growing steadily over 6 weeks of stolen moments and courtroom glances. "How are you? How's the new housing?" The E3 had been relocated to a dedicated refugee community on the city's north side, with proper accommodations and access to empathic counseling. Lyrie and 200 others were learning to rebuild lives in a world that had finally stopped treating them as threats. "It's strange," she admitted. "We can feel each other again without the dampening fields. The connection we've been missing. But it's also overwhelming after so long alone. We're relearning how to be ourselves." "That sounds exhausting and beautiful." "It's both." She took his hand, and he felt the question she was afraid to ask hovering in the emotional space between them. "What happens now? For you?" Eli had been thinking about that. His apartment was gone, couldn't afford rent during the trial. His career in bureaucratic administration was thoroughly destroyed. He had no job, no prospects, and a criminal record that would follow him everywhere. By all reasonable metrics, his life was a disaster. He'd never been happier. "Marcus offered me a position with the network," Eli said. "Helping refugees navigate the legal system, documenting abuses, being generally annoying to authority figures. Apparently I have relevant experience. You're going to keep fighting. I'm going to keep making terrible life choices that occasionally result in positive outcomes, yes. He squeezed her hand. But I wanted to ask you something first. That night before the infiltration, you said we needed to talk about what we're becoming. I've been thinking about that. Lyrie's expression shifted, vulnerable and hopeful. And what have you been thinking? That I spent 18 months being half alive, just existing without purpose, and then you told me I was different and I realized I wanted to actually be different. Not just perform goodness but embody it. He paused, trying to find words for something that felt too big for language. You changed me. Changed how I see myself, what I'm capable of. And I know we're from different worlds, different species, and this probably violates several diplomatic protocols, but... Eli. She pressed a finger to his lips, silver eyes bright with amusement. You're rambling. I ramble when I'm nervous. I know. I can feel it. She smiled. What you're trying to ask is whether this connection between us is real. Whether it's just empathic resonance or something more. Is it? Lyrie was quiet for a moment, and through their joined hands Eli felt her reaching for honesty, for vulnerability. My people have a concept called frequency recognition. It's when two consciousnesses resonate so perfectly that they become part of each other's fundamental pattern. It's rare, even among Aetheri. And it's not supposed to happen across species. Eli's heart was doing complicated acrobatics. But you feel like home. Like a frequency I've been searching for without knowing I was searching. When I sense you, I don't just feel emotions, I feel seen. Understood. Like you're the answer to a question I've been asking my entire life. She laughed, a little breathless. That probably sounds insane. That sounds like the best thing anyone's ever said to me. Eli cupped her face with his free hand, thumb brushing her cheek. I don't care if it violates protocols or confuses xenobiologists. I know what I feel. And what I feel is that being near you makes me want to be the person you see when you look at me. You already are that person. You just stopped hiding it. They kissed then, gentle and certain, and Eli felt the full force of her emotion crash over him, joy and relief and affection so fierce it bordered on overwhelming. But underneath it all was something steady, something that felt like recognition. Like coming home to a place he'd never been but had always been seeking. When they broke apart, Lyrie was crying, tears catching the afternoon light. I was so afraid. In that cell, before you came. I thought I would die feeling nothing but pain and loneliness. That I'd forgotten what connection felt like. And now. Now I remember. You reminded me. She pressed her forehead to his. Thank you. For the food, for the freedom, for seeing me when I'd become invisible. For being exactly who you are. Thank you for telling me I'm not like them. I really needed to hear that. They stood there in the transport station, two beings from different worlds who'd found each other in the margins of a broken system, and Eli thought about the guard who'd let him run, about Davies risking his job to help, about Marcus and Kess and the network of people choosing kindness over comfort. Maybe he wasn't special. Maybe he was just one person who decided to act instead of looking away. But that decision had rippled outward, touching others, creating change, proving that one person breaking their meal in half could start dismantling empires of cruelty. His datapad chimed. Message from Marcus, office opens Monday. Your desk is the one by the window. Try not to commit felonies in the first week. Try very hard. Eli showed it to Lyrie, who laughed. Are you going to follow that advice? Absolutely not. But I'll be creative about it. He pocketed the datapad and took both her hands. Want to get terrible coffee and celebrate my very conditional freedom? I know a place that serves something that's technically classified as food. That sounds perfect. They walked through New Geneva together, past protest banners still hanging from buildings, past news screens showing footage of detention facilities being reformed, past humans and aliens sharing sidewalks in the fragile piece of a world slowly learning to do better. The city was still broken in 1,000 ways, but it was less broken than it had been. Eli had learned something in the past weeks, that consciousness itself was a frequency, and some frequencies resonated with justice, with kindness, with the fundamental understanding that suffering shared was suffering lessened. He'd found his frequency. Or maybe Lyrie had helped him remember it. Either way, he was done being silent. Done accepting cruelty as inevitable. Done pretending one person couldn't matter. He was going to keep fighting, keep making terrible jokes, keep finding people in cells and deciding they deserved better. And he was going to do it with Lyrie beside him, two frequencies harmonizing into something new, something that proved connection could bridge any distance. "Hey," Lyrie said, squeezing his hand. "What are you thinking about?" Eli smiled, feeling the warmth of her presence, the certainty of purpose, the ridiculous joy of being exactly where he was supposed to be. "I'm thinking that I'm really glad I shared my food with you." "Me too." Her silver eyes were bright with mischief. "Though your food was terrible. Genuinely the worst thing I've ever tasted. And yet you cried. Because no one had ever been kind to me before." The crying was about the kindness, not the food quality. "I'm choosing to interpret that as a compliment to my food." "Interpret it however you want. You're very good at self-deception." They reached the coffee shop, and Eli held the door open, bowing with exaggerated formality. "After you, my silver-eyed critic." Lyrie laughed and stepped inside, and Eli followed, closing the door on one chapter of his life and opening another. The future was uncertain. He'd probably commit more crimes, probably get arrested again, probably keep making choices that horrified sensible people. But he'd do it knowing he was exactly who he was supposed to be. Not perfect. Not a hero. Just someone who decided that kindness mattered, that connection was worth fighting for, that one person sharing their meal could change everything. And really, what else was there?